from the News Channel 5 network. This is OpenLine.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to OpenLine. Glad you're with us tonight. Very important show, a very good show. We are talking about something that's really important. We're taking an inside look at a juvenile detention facility here in Tennessee that's run by the Department of Children's Services. A report is coming out tomorrow that details some pretty shocking stuff inside that DCS-run facility. The report, it's called Designed to Fail, and it's going to be coming out tomorrow. What we're going to do tonight is talk about that report and kind of preview that report. Of course, we want to hear from you. There's the number 615-737+. But we have with us two people who helped write this report. Jack Derryberry, he's the legal director with Disability Rights Tennessee, and Jennifer Rodriguez. She is executive director of the Youth Law Center. There they are, both on Zoom. Jennifer's coming all the way from California. Jack, right here in Nashville. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
What we're talking about, and I think we can put up a picture of this report. Again, it's called Designed to Fail. We are talking about a juvenile detention facility that is in Memphis. And Jack, I'll start with you. Disability Rights Tennessee began monitoring this facility back in September of 2020. You have access to this facility in ways that others don't. And so tell me why, in the first place, you decided to start going to this Wilder Youth Detention Center, which is outside of Memphis, and tell me why you started going there.
Well, Ben, first, thank you for the opportunity to be here with you and give a preview of this report, Designed to Fail. The reason we started going to monitor the programs and services at Wilder Youth Development Center is that we are the protection and advocacy agency for the state of Tennessee. Because of that, we are required by statute and our federal funders to provide legal, administrative, and other remedies to persons with disabilities who may in some way have been neglected or mistreated. And so, in the general course of events, we will monitor facilities run by, among others, the Department of Children's Services, of which Wilder is one. They also have a number of contract facilities that we monitor. And so we started, during pandemic and its prevalence, we did some virtual monitoring starting in 2020. And then in about May of last year, we started in-person monitoring at the facility. And what we found was very concerning. And so that after many more monitoring visits and the review of a host of records, many interviews and meetings with staff, students at the facility, as well as discussing with parents and others, we just started looking at developing this report. And somewhere in that process, when we realized what we had found and the seriousness of it, we also got in touch with the Youth Law Center, which is a nationally recognized law firm that deals with youth law issues. And they have been of enormous help to us, and we appreciate their assistance.
So Disability Rights Tennessee, you obviously advocate for the disabled in Tennessee, and you have authority that others don't have. If I called up and said, I want to go inside the Wilder Youth Development Center, they would not let me. They would say, no, you can't go. But you, as this organization with Disability Rights Tennessee, you all were allowed inside and you could get access. And what you found, you decided was quite disturbing. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's accurate. What it's called is access authority, Ben. And under access authority, we are able to monitor the facility. That means we can go into the facility, we can talk with students, we have access to any area that a student would have access to, which would be the entire facility, and we can talk to staff, and then we can report on what we find. If we find something that is concerning, that could be either actual abuse or neglect or a risk of abuse or neglect, where a youth there is placed in jeopardy, then we can open an investigation and get records from the facility, from the Department of Children's Services, and then interview staff, interview the students, and come up with a conclusion on our monitoring and or our investigation.
So you start doing this, you start monitoring, beginning back in September of 2020, and what you found was disturbing enough that you brought in the Youth Law Center, right? And so, Jennifer, explain how you were brought in and kind of what your role is now that you've seen this information.
Absolutely. So the Youth Law Center is a national advocacy organization. We're a law firm that really is charged with protecting and defending the rights of children who are in foster care and juvenile justice systems across the country. And we are a relatively small national organization, and so we are always looking for those cases where they are the most egregious violations of children's rights to put our resources to. And when Disability Rights Tennessee, when Jack and his colleagues came to us and shared some of the findings and the stories of children, we were horrified. Under Department of Children Services in Tennessee has the charge of protecting children, but some of the stories that we heard, and we heard countless stories, were stories about, for example, a child who had grown up in foster care and, no fault of his own, had experienced abuse and neglect, and who was really needing some therapeutic and mental health services. And his family trusted the Department of Children Services and Wilder to provide those services to him. And instead, what we heard from Disability Rights Tennessee is that this was a child who immediately got recruited into a gang in the facility, who was physically assaulted in front of other staff people who did not intervene, and then ended up in solitary confinement, spending 23 hours a day, smelling urine, mold, sharing space with lizards and rodents. And you can imagine, just for a child who needed help desperately and who turned to the state to receive that and then receive this kind of treatment, why this would be the kind of situation that the Youth Law Center chose to intervene in. And so our role in this situation is really, whenever we see a facility like Wilder, we always know there are deep and systemic problems with the system underlying. We know there has to be a different approach to intervening with the most vulnerable children. If children are to be safe, if the community in Tennessee is going to be safe, something drastically different has to happen.
And so you look at situations all across the entire country, and what you saw at Wilder, how would you say it compares to what you see all across the country?
I mean, this is the worst kind of treatment of children, really dehumanizing children, subjecting them to abuse, to neglect, sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, depriving them of needed educational services, of physical and mental health services, depriving them of contact with family, loved ones, of basically all of the things that could actually help them habilitate and return to the community and be able to be productive, contributing family members. Instead, they are receiving abuse at the hands of the state, at the hands of taxpayers. So the situation at Wilder was really some of the worst conditions that we've seen across the country.
And let's talk a little bit about Wilder. And I know in this report, Jack, it says, yeah, we're focusing on Wilder, but what we saw at Wilder is likely happening, or maybe it says in the report it is happening, at other juvenile detention facilities across the state. And this is bigger than Wilder. I believe it says something to that effect in the report. But I think what the state might say is the youth, the juvenile that are there, this houses boys 14 to 18. This place is right outside of Memphis. They are some of the most they would say some of the most violent in the state, and these are kids that have done some bad things, and it's hard to manage that kind of population. And so if the state were to say that, Jack, what do you say?
Well, what we think is that regardless of why the youth are there, the statutes under which the Department of Children's Services operates requires them to evaluate their needs, assess their needs, plan a program of treatment and rehabilitation for them, which is evidence-based, and then to actually provide that program on a consistent and ongoing basis. And then while the program is being provided, to assess how they are doing, assess their progress, and prepare them to transition out of the facility, because these youth are going to transition out of the facility. They are going to return to their home communities. And the only way to make that safe and successful is to assess their needs and plan for the delivery of services to meet their needs, and then to actually deliver those services so that they can transition out effectively.
Now, if you go on their website, it reads about Wilder, it gives a description, and it says that they offer all kinds of counseling and sort of mental health services, and it's a place where you can go and kind of get well, that it is a hard-wired facility. It's a top-level security facility, but there are all of these services that are there. What did you find? And Jennifer, I guess I'll ask you. What was found when they went there? What kind of services are there for the kids that are at the facility?
Well, then the irony is that the name of the facility is the Wilder Youth Development Facility, and what happens at Wilder is pretty much the polar opposite to anything that we would ever describe as youth development. So the kind of services and supports that you would expect to see attached to something like that's called a youth development center are habilitative services. We would expect to see young people involved in extracurricular activities, learning anger management and coping skills, developing healthy pro-social relationships with adults, getting re-engaged or engaged in school, right? Which we know is one of the most important interventions for getting youth on the right track. And instead, what Disability Rights Tennessee found at these facilities were young people who were missing extended periods of school, who were maybe only getting a couple hours a week of school while they were in a solitary confinement unit. Disability Rights Tennessee identified young people who were encouraged to fight by staff and actually incentivized to fight by staff people there. Disability Rights Tennessee identified young people who had not been outside in weeks, who were sitting inside cells inside the facility. In the report, one story of a young person that's detailed gained 44 pounds in a year because they simply were not moving. So what was happening in this facility we know more at this moment than we've sort of ever known in human history about youth development and adolescent brain science, and everything that's happening in this facility undermines habilitation for youth and youth actually getting on track to be well, and has nothing to do with youth development and really amounts to abuse and neglect.
And so, Jack, Jennifer said something about systemic. This is systemic. It's bigger than the one facility, as we discussed. But why is it happening? I mean, why would these things that you found be happening? We've certainly done several stories on the Department of Children's Services, which has a wide array of responsibilities, and we see that there's a major staffing shortage with caseworkers. Why are we finding these situations that you are describing, in your opinion, why are we finding them at Wilder right now?
I think you have significant shortages of staff. I think you have a failure to properly train and supervise staff that carry out programs. I think you have a failure to properly evaluate and plan for the students that are there, and then to actually provide the program. You know, Ben, if you have a dormitory which has 2 residential case managers in it, but if, as has often happened, those case managers are co-opted into being security staff because they don't have enough security staff, then you don't have residential case management going on in facilities. And then I think another thing is that, in effect, Wilder has become a warehouse for youth of color who have disabilities. There are vastly disproportionate numbers of youth with disabilities and youth of color at the facility. 3 and 4 times the incidence of those particular situations in the community. And so you have to ask yourself, why is that? In the normal course of events, there would not be 95% of students in any school that are Black, or 80% of students in any school that have disabilities. And in the normal course of events, if you were a student with a disability, your needs would be assessed, your program would be planned, and services would be provided consistent with that program. That's not happening.
And Jennifer, I want to ask you the same question before we go to break that I asked Jack. If DCS says, and I haven't heard back we haven't heard back from DCS yet, if they say this facility, it cares for some of the toughest kids in the entire state, we're doing the best we can. There are staffing shortages. There's staffing shortages in every profession right now. But this is a uniquely hard population to manage. What do you say?
I don't doubt that it's a hard task. Habilitating the youth that have experienced the most trauma and sort of the most hardship is not for the weak at heart. But I think that the proof is this is not working. It's not working for the children. It's not working for the community. And we actually know what does work, which is a really important point, that there's a whole body of evidence out there that tells us that the most effective interventions, they actually all involve family. They all involve making sure that young people are in the community whenever possible, wrapped with extensive services. All of the evidence tells us that this kind of facility, the issues at Wilder are at a high level of sort of egregiousness, but these kind of problems are endemic to these kind of facilities. These facilities do not work. So the model is really a failed model, hence the name of the report, Designed to Fail.
And all right, one more question. You're obviously a law center. It's a nonprofit law center. Are you thinking of suing? What do you think is going to happen after this report comes out? And are you thinking of suing the state based on the conditions at Wilder?
The conditions at Wilder are so egregious that we really truly believe that once a light is shown on the conditions, that policymakers and the public in Tennessee will not tolerate children on our dollar and our watch being treated in this way. And just to put that statement in perspective, we are spending upwards of $400 per day per child to abuse and neglect them. I mean, that is an incredible cost that's coming out of the wallet of each and every community member in Tennessee. So we don't believe that we will have to litigate. I mean, we certainly will make sure that children are safe and make sure that we have an approach that doesn't cause further harm. But we do believe in policymakers and the public in Tennessee that they will take action.
All right, we are going to take a break. If you want to call in with a question, comment, whatever, there's the number, 615-737-PLUS, 615-737-7587. We'll take a break. Be back right after this.